Welcome to Euronews Tonight. I'm Mariam Zaidi. Here are the headlines. EU leaders gather in Brussels for their last summit of the year. Rising tensions with Russia and the rapid rise of the Omicron variant feature big. But can they find a coordinated response? As the UK records more than 88,000 new COVID-19 infections, France bans all non-essential travel from the UK from Saturday. A new Dutch government is being approved in The Hague after a mammoth 9 months of coalition talks. It's expected to hand Mark Rutte a historic fourth term in office.
And France has ordered a facial recognition company to delete its data, accusing them of breaking strict EU privacy rules.
It's the last European Council summit of the year, and how to handle COVID-19 remains firmly on the agenda. The rapid spread of the new Omicron variant, as well as concerns over the conflict in Ukraine, were at the forefront of discussions in Brussels. The bloc is seeking to send a strong message of solidarity with Ukraine, where it's feared rising tensions with Russia could further escalate the war in the east of the country. But top of the agenda was COVID-19, with EU leaders wrangling over different approaches for how to stem the spread of the new variant. The new German health minister has announced that the country is facing a shortage of both Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna vaccine doses, the two vaccines used for booster jabs against coronavirus. With just over a week in office, Karl Lauterbach said negotiations are underway to purchase more vaccines from mostly Eastern European countries. So far this month, Germany has inoculated over 1 million people per day, and this week the country rolled out jabs for 5 to 11-year-olds. Portugal will extend its COVID-19 border controls beyond the initial date of January 9th. The country requires a negative test for all arrivals, regardless of their vaccination status. The Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, cited the threat of the spread of Omicron and said the option to tighten measures remains on the table. Well, we're now going to go to Brussels and to our correspondent, Shona Murray. Shona, good to see you. So, COVID is, of course, casting its shadow over this last EU leaders summit in Brussels. With Omicron really now starting to bite in the bloc, have you got a sense of what the coordinated response could be?
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned there, very much the early part of today was discussing the worsening epidemiological situation across Europe and how to deal with that and the emergence of Omicron. Specifically, EU leaders agreed that getting boosters, boosting vaccinations, because there's still quite a lot of vaccine hesitancy in some parts of Europe, in particular countries like Bulgaria, where you have only about 30% fully vaccinated. So therefore, tackling things like misinformation and disinformation, and also making sure that all member states are working in lockstep to ensure that the single market can stay open and people can continue to travel, because as we know, some countries, Italy, Portugal, Ireland, have applied testing regimes on people regardless of vaccination status. So you still have to have a negative PCR test to get into Ireland, Portugal or Italy. But in Italy, if you're unvaccinated, you have to quarantine for 5 days. So with that, EU leaders are going to agree that the COVID certificate should last for about 9 months. So you have 6 months to get a booster and then 3 months administrative after that. But I think there's also a feeling that boosters need to be given to people well before 6 months, in some cases 3 months or 4 months. So it really is very much an evolving situation, as we know, particularly with Omicron, because we really don't know the full facts here. But I caught up earlier with Luxembourgish Prime Minister Xavier Bettel, and he really called today for a proper coordination and cooperation amongst all 27 members.
National decision, but for me it's a common problem and we need common solutions. And afterwards, for me, what is very important on the agenda today, it's that we decide about how long the COVID certificate is valid, because if it will be 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, it's a disaster. You don't know, so I hope we will be able to agree on 9 months and not soon today. And also about the fact when the booster has to be done. It goes from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months, and it would be good also to have a common position on that.
Xavier Bettel, the Luxembourgish Prime Minister, echoing the calls by many Prime Ministers, including the Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, that all Member States need to work together on this to have a standardised decision about how to move ahead with travel in the single market.
Well, let's see if that comes. And Shona, have EU leaders shown any appetite for ramping up the pressure on Russia vis-a-vis further restrictions, further sanctions?
Yeah, well, this is a discussion that took place a lot yesterday in the Eastern Partnership with Eastern partners of the EU, Ukraine included. And then today it's very much on the agenda in relation to what response Europe should have towards Russia if it does engage militarily against Ukraine, which is obviously a huge fear. There hasn't been, and there probably won't be, conclusions or an agreement on to what response the Europe will have, for obvious reasons, from a security perspective, but also because there isn't full agreement on that, other to say, and I caught up with the Irish Prime Minister, Irish Taoiseach, earlier, he said, other to say that there will be a very strong response, and that'll likely be in the form of very deep, very wide-ranging sanctions. Mariam?
Shona, thanks for the update from Brussels from the summit. Thank you. All non-essential travel from the UK to France will be banned from Saturday. The French government put the rule in place over concerns about the high number of coronavirus cases circulating in Britain. French nationals, their families and residents of France will be allowed to enter, but will have to observe a minimum self-imposed quarantine of 48 hours. The UK recorded over 88,000 new COVID-19 infections on Thursday, another record-breaking figure, and a leap of almost 10,000 on the previous day. Natalia Puzarev, an MP for the governing En Marche movement, gave us the reasons behind the decision.
Now we are very cautious about the way the Omicron variant is spreading all over Europe, of course, but mainly in the UK. I think where it reached 40% of the cases. At the moment, France is only concerned by 240 cases of Omicron variant, but it's spreading very quickly. And we are very concerned about the fact that our hospitals could become overwhelmed by the end of the year. There are some estimation that we could reach 4,000 persons in critical care by the end of the year, which is really high. Of course, we have another policy when it comes to European member states. We have a consultation process where we will avoid by all means to close our borders. It's not the case, unfortunately, for the EU. So the travels, cross-channel travels, will be limited to compelling situations. Of course, we expect the British residents in France to be able to enter the country, and the French nationals, the students, for instance, in the UK will be able to come back as well.
Well, for more on that French travel ban, I'm now going to be joined by Tig Enright, who's outside St Pancras in London. Tig, talk us through what these travel restrictions really mean and what reaction has there been in the UK?
Hi, Mariam. Well, what it means is that if you are a Briton who'd hope to visit friends or family over Christmas time, you can't. If you simply wanted to go for a winter holiday, perhaps to go skiing, for example, you can't. And even if you wanted to go for work reasons too, the vast majority of professional reasons are not deemed to be compelling. So it is really a return to the bad or sad old days of a ban on non-essential travel, essential travel only. In fact, it's even tougher for Britons because they were previously allowed to travel for work purposes the last time there was such a ban like this in place. Now, truck drivers, for example, are exempt, so the British government's relieved on that front. It should not affect the supply chains between Britain and the continent. And of course, it does not apply if you are a French citizen, a French resident, or their families, or indeed if you're an EU citizen who simply wants to pass through France on your way home. For those people, though, who can still go to France, there'll be tougher testing requirements for them and at least 2 days of quarantine when they get there. But you can just imagine the disappointment among the people who have had plans to go to France and have had to cancel those plans. The UK government's response, I would say, is not terribly dramatic, but they have suggested that Paris's decision is pretty pointless when you consider that Omicron, as they put it, is in Europe and is already spreading fast there too.
Well, the bad and sad days coming back doesn't sound like a good thing, Tig. Now, it's no secret, of course, that the UK and France are at loggerheads over migration, over fishing. The new restrictions aren't going to help relations. Can we see the UK perhaps retaliating?
I think that's unlikely. You're right, though. It certainly can't help smooth over these difficult times. At the time of the announcement, Downing Street said that there had been no conversation between President Macron or Prime Minister Boris Johnson about it. Keep in mind, this time last year, we had a similar response from France when the new, at that time, new UK variant, subsequently renamed Alpha variant, became the latest variant of concern. As for retaliation, a spokesperson for Boris Johnson's office has said no. And actually, in the last few days, the UK has actually relaxed its own travel restrictions. It's removed hotel quarantine for people coming from the highest risk countries because, to the earlier point which was made by the government here, because Omicron is already here, there's little point in having these tough restrictions in place.
Again, right, thank you so much. As we heard there, tensions continue between the countries over the rising number of migrant crossings in the English Channel. The European Union's border and coast guard agency Frontex has now stepped up efforts to monitor migrant movements in the area. Our international correspondent Annelise Borges was in Lille to see the agency's latest operation.
This Danish aircraft has just landed here in Lille in northern France. This is the plane Frontex has been using to conduct operations over the English Channel. For 2 weeks now, the agency has been monitoring illegal crossings since that shipwreck that killed 27 people off the coast of France. The commander of this mission says the team is making a difference, albeit a limited one.
I think people will go, if they are desperate enough, they'll go no matter what is happening. So I just hope we can be there and help prevent the loss of life. I cannot go into directly details of exactly what we've seen, but we have some photos here that we can show you of the various camps that we're looking at, especially at Calais and Dunkirk.
So mostly monitoring camps, not really...
Monitoring camps to see what is the pattern of life, what are they doing, are they preparing a launch, and also looking, of course, at the beaches to see if there are launches.
Upon return to base this Thursday morning, the crew said they had just had their busiest outing yet.
We saw boats in the water, and we saw also boats on the beaches and in the dunes getting prepared to go into the water. They were pumping them up, preparing with engines, motors. This was the first time we saw it on this massive scale.
This Frontex operation is tasked with monitoring illegal crossings, but officers say they are equipped for more.
If they are in need or distress, we are also capable of dropping emergency equipment, life raft from this aircraft while we're flying, and we can even support with dropping a flare that will light up the area.
About a dozen people are involved in Operation Opal Coast, and this particular plane is supposed to be deployed over the English Channel and Northern Sea until the end of the year. However, Frontex says it remains at EU member states' disposal when it comes to deploying more resources to the region. Annelise Borges in Lille for Euronews.
We'll take a short break here, but keep watching Euronews tonight. The European Central Bank cut stimulus on Thursday, but vowed to continue its monetary support for the Eurozone economy into the next year. It said it will phase out its emergency debt buying programme, but will expand regular bond purchases to try and smooth the transition. The ECB also cut its 2022 growth outlook as the COVID-19 pandemic and supply chain disruptions slow economic recovery. The Bank of England has raised interest rates from a record low of 0.1% to 0.25% as inflation pressures mount in the UK. It means the cost of borrowing for businesses and households in the UK will go up. Analysts are also warning that the potential benefit of a better return on savings could be muted. But in Turkey, the country's central bank vowed to cut the country's key interest rate from 15% to 14%. It sent the lira to a new record low of 15.5 to the dollar immediately following the news. The Netherlands is set to have a new old leader. Mark Rutte is expected to be appointed again as the head of the government, marking his fourth term in office. Now, this decision has been a long time coming, a record 9 months after the election in March. Our reporter Fernand van Tetz joins us now from The Hague in the Netherlands. So, Fernand, after 271 days, it looks like the Netherlands will have a new leader. But if appointed, what will be Rutte's first tasks?
So the first task, Mariam, is for him to put together his cabinet to figure out who is going to be on his team. Now that is expected to take about 3 weeks, and then after the Christmas recess at the beginning of January, he will be presenting his team to the king, and then they can really get to work. So still not an end in sight completely to that very, very, very long formation process that has been criticized plenty behind me today when the parties were discussing the plans put forward by the new but old full coalition government.
Fernand, what do you think are going to be the policy highlights or priorities of this new coalition government?
So the plans are very ambitious. It's mostly about spending lots and lots of money. There's 35 billion euros going to fight climate change, and they have a very ambitious target of reducing CO2 emissions by up to 60% by 2030. Now, you'll have to remember that the Netherlands is actually one of the countries with the highest CO2 emissions per capita in Europe, so they're really looking to make a big turnaround on that front. They're also saying they're going to build 100,000 new homes every single year in order to address a huge housing crisis. The minimum wage is set to increase, and also childcare is supposed to become almost free for all working parents. So lots of money being spent. And lots of criticism here of that by the opposition today, particularly actually looking at healthcare, because while we're in the midst of a corona crisis, there's structurally more money going to the healthcare system right now. But over 5 years, they're hoping to actually cut back on healthcare costs. And that was a big issue for the opposition here today.
Fernand van Tetz, thank you so much for the update. France's privacy watchdog is the latest authority to order Clearview AI, a facial recognition company, to delete citizens' data. The French watchdog says the company has abused strict European privacy rules. Matthew in the Cube has the story.
This all concerns an American company called Clearview AI. It's one that you might not have heard of. They have amassed a database of around 10 billion photos and videos, largely ones they have taken or scraped off the things that we citizens upload to the internet. Things like the selfies you might post on Facebook or Instagram. Now, with these photos, they then sell their facial recognition and identity matching software to police, law enforcement officials, but also to businesses. Now, here in the European Union, there have previously been controversies. For example, a number of member states have issued complaints about Clearview AI. And also in the United Kingdom, where authorities there threatened to fine the American company more than £17 million sterling, asking them to delete this kind of data. This database of photos has raised concerns that the amount of surveillance you see in countries like China could also soon be prevalent here in the West. And now France's data protection watchdog is the latest to criticise Clearview AI. In a statement, they issued a formal warning, calling on the US company to delete this database, accusing them of violating strict EU rules when it comes to data protection. The watchdog said in a statement that it had unlawfully processed tens of millions of photos from various French citizens, something that they said was particularly intrusive. Now, Clearview AI has not responded to this latest threat of a fine, and these fines could total up to 20 million euros, or 4% of the company's global annual turnover. And what's also interesting is that because Clearview does not have a base in the European Union, it's not just France. Any of the 27 member states in the bloc could also bring this kind of similar action. So, Mariam, France may just be the latest to threaten to sanction Clearview AI, but the American company could also soon see further threats from a number of other countries here in the EU.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, we're going to take a short break, but coming up, will he appeal or not? After the break, we have the latest on the Lewis Hamilton Formula One controversy. Stay tuned to Euronews. Welcome back to the programme. To sport now, and Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes team has decided not to appeal against Sunday's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix result after a controversial win in the final by Red Bull's Max Verstappen. Joining me now to discuss all the latest is our reporter Angela Barnes. Ange, good to see you. Good to have you here. So after all the controversy, Mercedes have finally decided to drop their appeal.
That's right, absolutely. Well, they've dropped it against the FIA, and apparently Lewis Hamilton was very much behind that decision as well, because he didn't want his 8th title win to be sort of decided in the court such a momentous title. So therefore, Max Verstappen is the champion for the first time of this one. But, you know, as well, it was also something that Mercedes lawyers felt that they had an incredibly strong case to push for. But when FIA World Sport Council acknowledged that they were going to investigate this further, that was enough for Mercedes lawyers to then say, OK, we're going to take a step back on this. And of course, Lewis Hamilton as well felt that it was best not to go down the legal route, saying in the best interest of Formula One as well. Mercedes have commented on this now as well, and they've actually said in a statement that the way things unfolded was not right and had initially appealed, of course, as they did in the interest of sporting fairness, they said. But they also took the time now to as well congratulate Max Verstappen on his win, and they said, we congratulate you on your achievements and your entire team, and we look forward to taking the fight to you on the track next season.
Well, I guess that's a nice little statement to end this whole controversy. OK, so moving on to the English Premier League, and unfortunately, COVID is obviously having this massive impact in the UK. Clubs are being hit by positive tests, and now some games are also being called off. Tell us more. Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, a number of fixtures have been called off as the Omicron variant, COVID-19 variant, continues to, case numbers continue to go up in the UK and, of course, as we know, globally. But the fixtures that have been postponed include Man United versus Brentford and their game as well against Brighton at the weekend, and then tonight's match between Leicester City and Tottenham has also been postponed. Watford and Burnley last night, and that's just some of them because of the increasing number of cases among teams. Now, because of all of this, clubs are pushing the Premier League to completely shut down the league until the new year. But the Premier League is saying that whilst the priority health of players is obviously, it's their priority, but they said that they intend to continue its current fixture schedule where safely possible. Well, let's hope that they can. Angela, thank you so much for joining me on set. OK, well, that's it for the programme, but we will leave you with a no comment from Madrid in Spain, where protesters have voiced their support for LGBTQ+ issues being discussed in schools. Thanks for watching Euronews Tonight.
Sal Ayuso y a la ventanita que te traigo una bandera gay. Los derechos LGTB. Ayuso, payasa, fuera de mi casa.
Poneros a lo largo de la pancarta, porfa.
Hacer, poner...